Right, this episode of How I Would Do It is for Linton Davies, since you asked how I use the Stream Deck. So up here I have the Stream Deck software, which very conveniently gives a mirroring of the buttons of the Stream Deck and what it looks like. So I can navigate it down here and it will be mirrored up there for the screen capture. So we'll go through it. I'll show you how I use it, what I use it for primarily, how I've got it set up, and particularly in terms of editing as well. Now, before we get started, I'll do a quick summary of what a Stream Deck is for any of you who may not know. So a Stream Deck is an external input device that's entirely customizable. So there are other alternatives like Touch Portal for the iPad, as well as things like Loop Deck. But what these essentially do is give you a bunch of programmable buttons that can do anything that you set them to do. As you know, I'll demonstrate with how I use mine in a minute. Some of them have buttons, some of them have dials, and in the case of the Stream Deck, each button is programmable with a display. So each button's got its own little LCD display. We choose what the icon is, what's displayed. Like these ones here are actually reading out widgets at all times, little readouts, some CPU usage is there. And you can use these for all kinds of things, to control software, to trigger macros or whatever you want to use it for. But once you've got this set up, it gives the user a lot more control over the computer at their fingertips, right there at your disposal. So that's what a Stream Deck is. So let's get into how it works and how I use it. So this here is the Stream Deck software. Here on the right here, we have a whole bunch of actions and different things and shortcuts and plugins of how we can configure the buttons to do different things. And over here we have a readout of the Stream Deck. So this is a readout of the buttons, I think, as I mentioned before. So as I navigate the Stream Deck down here, it'll mirror what's up here. So it's going to make it very handy for this purpose for demonstrating. So I'm going to use the Stream Deck in order to properly sort of demonstrate it. I could use the mouse and do it up here, but I'll try to stick to the Stream Deck just to demonstrate how I can use it and navigate around. So this is my home page. This is my default profile. Your Stream Deck's normally divided up into profiles for different uses, but you can have just different pages and pages or buttons within folders and different things like that. Like down here, this button is a folder that has some functions in it. But you are better off to have different profiles, because you can have these profiles trigger to launch when you launch a specific app. So for example, I have an Avid Profile that launches automatically. The Stream Deck switches to that set of keys when I launch Avid Media Composer. So let's have a look at the home profile, and then we'll have a look at a couple of the others briefly, and then we'll have a look over my Avid one, since that's probably my primary one that I use, and one that pertains to the ethos of this channel. So starting from right to left here, mostly just because the left is navigating to other profiles. Up the top we have an application switcher. So this is just like hitting Command Tab. It's the exact same thing, but I've just got it on one button, just because it's slightly easier. Under this you'll notice that kind of looks like a power button, and it's essentially what it is. It's triggering a macro. So if I click here, you can see it configured. This is referring to an application called Keyboard Maestro, which is where I configure my scripts and macros and stuff like that. I have a whole load of macros. There is a video on the YouTube channel doing a deep dive into this and demonstrating them all. And so a lot of my keys on my Stream Deck are triggering macros because I don't have to assign a hotkey to the macro. There is a plugin for the Stream Deck where I can just put in a button, and then it links to Keyboard Maestro, and I can just pick from my scripts and assign that button to trigger a script. So what this one will do is quit all of my applications and then shut down the computer. So when I'm done at the end of the day, I can just hit that button and then get up and walk away. And there's a whole bunch more buttons like this that are triggering macros in Keyboard Maestro for other purposes, like all of these four, and this one, and a whole lot more elsewhere. Now you can use the Stream Deck to configure a macro at a more simple level, like a series of keystrokes and things. You can't script at least on a Mac, you can't script mouse clicks or more advanced scripting stuff. But you can do most stuff. And so if I'm going into a job at a facility and they're running on Windows, then I've got a set of macros and a different profile that I use just for that. And I'll use the Stream Deck to get back some of that macro functionality that I use at home through Keyboard Maestro. So continuing along, these two here are brightness, up and down on the keys. I'll give you a quick show demonstration because this will give you a look at the Stream Deck as well. So here's the Stream Deck. Turn the brightness down, it dims all the way down to nothing, and turn the brightness up. I usually just have it up full because it just makes it easier to see. And I'll put my camera back there. These two are authenticators for my home Mac and for like remote working and for other things. I'll create one if it's a password that I'm having to enter all the time. Then I'll hit this key, I'll enter in the password and then hit enter. Because if I'm not at the computer, I'll put it to sleep, so I'll need to log in anyway to enable it. And when I'm in a facility, when I'm not there, when I go home for the day, I'll take the Stream Deck with me. So I wouldn't leave that there. So it's never a security risk necessarily to have this button. But it saves me a lot of time, particularly on jobs that are super high security, really remoting into places where there's multiple logins. And it's just a bit faster for me to input it each time. These two here are clock in and out. So these are both triggering. These both trigger a separate macro, one called clock in, one called clock out, and and this is for my current job I'm doing via remote for a company called Access Studios at the moment. And so clicking login will launch all the different applications that I use for that job, like Teradici, Slack, and other stuff. A browser with specific web pages like ShotGrid that I need to use for that. And clock out will quit all of just those specific apps, but leave any other apps I have open where they are. So that sort of covers those there. So this one up here called Test is a Keyboard Maestro button that I can link to any script just by selecting it in the software and picking a script. And I use this whenever I'm building a macro, particularly a more complex one, so that, because you need to run it a lot as you're building it just to test and make sure functions are working. I've added pauses and sleeps in the right place and things like that. So good to have a test button. The four I have in the center are all readers, widgets. And so I've got the time and date, I've got, unread emails, which, yes, I know, need cleaned up. Normally I always re-zero that, but, I haven't done it in a few days. Weather app and CPU usage. Sometimes I've got more, I've got an iCal one, but that's sort of like next meeting, so it depends on the job I'm on, if I'm using a lot of sync calendars, and I need to get back to them. This one up here called apps is what you might expect. It's launching applications. So I can just hit any key, it'll launch any of these apps. The one underneath it is for links. Now, I recently had to rebuild this because it all got wiped through a corruption. And I did have a backup as of the previous day, but I felt like, I hadn't, done a fresh install in a while, in a couple of years. So I just used this as a chance to completely rebuild everything. So I haven't set all my links back up again. I do prefer to have them here than have them in bookmarks. I don't necessarily like the function of syncing bookmarks across, and I don't use Google Chrome anyway. So having them on my Stream Deck just feels a little more at my fingertips. So I can launch that bookmark straight before I even launch the browser, for example. So the three that I've put up so far are ShotGrid, Frame.io, and Patreon. But I've got a lot more that I need to assemble. Down here I've got Finder tags. So this is a really useful function that I use in Mac, if you're not familiar. Yeah, I've got a temp folder here with some files. Now, say if I want to just attach some metadata to this, without editing the file in any way, I can add a tag. And you can actually add multiple tags, and you have them mean different things. I've just attached a red one there, just called red. But I can create a custom tag, like I've got one for The Treasure, which is a short film. Chuck was a film I did. You know, I've got paid and unpaid, so I put tags onto my invoices and stuff like that. In my Avid Media Files folder as well, like I tend to have tags showing, you know, the project that each media file, MXF folder pertains to, and stuff like that. It's a really useful Mac function. But normally, if you want to add one of these tags, you just have to bring up the inspector tool on the relevant file or files, and type in here the name of the tag, and then hit enter, and it gets added, which isn't really too much of a difficult. Or you can drag and drop it into here if you, and it'll show you your most recent tags. But with these keys here, I can just select whatever the file is or files, and then just click the button I want on the Stream Deck, and it'll apply the color. So just to undo that. But that's a really useful function that I quite like, and one that I have on my home screen because you know, it's something when I'm browsing files I'm most likely to do. Cool. In the very top left here, this is just media keys. You know, so the bottom left is video, the top right is music. This button here for play pause. If I'm playing a song, no, like, you know, what shall we play? Let's play the Ghostbusters theme, because why not? If I just tab back to it, that shows the artwork for the song that's currently playing. So if I just hit pause, it disappears and it just shows the play button. If I hit play again, that artwork will come back. Let's turn that off just now and come back here. But our last button over here is just under our media button there, over just here. And if I go in there, you can see that these are all YouTube links. So each one of these is a YouTube channel, as the preview shows. And if I hit any of these buttons, it's going to take me to the latest video that's been uploaded by that channel. So I can sort of check in on the channels that I'm following. These are some of the ones that I follow mostly, although I don't really get a whole lot of time for that. And to be honest, a lot of the time if I'm watching YouTube, it's probably going to be on the go, or it'll be on my phone, on the train, or stuff like that. But that sort of covers it for my home screen. So let's jump to another profile. This next one here is Wavelink. I won't go over all of the buttons, but essentially I can control the mix of these recordings. So it pairs with an Elgato mic that I've got, because Elgato make both the Stream Deck and the mic, so the software is very compatible. And I can adjust the mix and increase the volume going up or down for the different channels. So both the mic or Avid during one of my tutorials, for example. It's quite useful to be able to tab to this and do it as I'm talking as well. You know, it's called the Stream Deck, so this is geared towards streamers, so there's a lot of function for that sort of live switching of audio and stuff like that. Right, next profile we'll look at is Final Cut, just because this is a good example of one that's been purchased. So this isn't a profile that I personally assembled and configured all the buttons. This is one I bought. Because at the time I use Final Cut 10 now and then, because it's nice as a quick and dirty editing platform for if I need to slap something together very quickly, I don't want it to do any transcoding, or if I just want to, you know, make a very short video or something where I can utilize plugins, since Avid doesn't have a lot of affordable plugin support. So here it's broken up into a bunch of categories, and I can go into any of these categories and control a whole lot of functions within that. So some of these have multiple pages. In order to fit in all of the buttons, there's countless different functions that are available in this purchase profile for a whole lot of different things, to do with color corrections, keyframing, exporting, it's sort of everything you could really think of, even controlling workspaces and different displays and stuff. So having that all at my fingertips there, you know, means that, especially at the time, because when I first got this, I wasn't super familiar with Final Cut, and even though I'd had it for ages, I just dipped into it now and then, and so I find it quicker to find functions this way rather than look around the UI. But that's a good example one that you can buy. This was purchased from a company called Sideshow Effects, who make not just for Stream Deck but for Loop Deck and Touch Portal and other alternatives. They make custom profiles and due to the layout of the buttons. So very cool guys to do very good work. And my last profile I'll go over here is my Avid one. So this also launches whenever I launch Avid, and each one of these buttons is one that I've personally set up, since my Avid keyboard layout is highly customized, and the vast majority of the keys that I use most of the time, and the functions that I go to most often, are on my keyboard. I definitely do use my keyboard the most, but there's a lot of functions that I would like to have available to me very quickly without going to menus or doing any extra clicking, that I've put here. So along the right, you can see I've got my workspaces. I've got smart tools, toggling, the different segment modes. The key just says segment mode overwrite, but that's because I didn't have an icon for, toggle segment mode. But I did have one for trim type. Link selection, transition manipulation, sequence maps, a whole bunch of different functions here. And if you've been following the shorts videos that I've been doing mostly on Tuesdays, then you'll recognize a lot of these functions like cycle picture and sound, transition manipulation, sequence maps, because I think I've done shorts videos on a number of these functions. Toggling the audio waveform data on and off, that's another really good one. Rendering into out. So having these functions there available to me as a key, especially if they're ones that you sort of forget about because you don't use them that often. Like maybe the list tool. I know it's in the tools menu, it's faster for me to get to. So the next tab, I can make an audio mix down straight from this. Cycle the trim side. Lock and unlock tracks very quickly. So it's really useful to be able to have all this straight at hand. And as I said before, I'll bring this with me when I'm going into jobs, when I'm going to facilities, because it does save me a lot of time. In the top left, you'll see there's a key with the Avid logo, and it says scripts. Might be hard to read there, but it says scripts. And so this is just some quick scripts that I've made for different specific purposes within Avid. So for example, I'm doing VFX pulls, but not like big ones at a time. And it's a complex timeline, so I didn't want to use the normal decompose method, if you're familiar with VFX editing. So I'm manually subclipping them. So I've got a button there that when I hit it, if I'm hovering over a clip, it will make a subclip that's just the duration of that clip as it appears in the timeline, but with 8 frames extra at the head and the tail. So an 8 frames handle subclip. So I just need to hover to one VFX shot, hit that button, then go to the next one, hit the button, and I'm getting my subclips for the plates. I've got one for getting the current time code, for example. So just get the current time code the playhead's at and copy it to the clipboard, which I'm amazed isn't actually a function. It should be, but I've got a button for that. So all that's really doing when I hit it is doing a mark in point, finding the sequence in the bin. So I to mark in, 2 for me to find bin, and then it's tabbing across to where I've set the mark in cell in the bin, and then Command C to copy that to my clipboard, and then I've got that time code and I can paste it somewhere. So I've not necessarily thought up of a whole lot of tools that I need. I make these on a case-by-case basis. It's as I need something, I'll make a macro, or if I'm ever doing anything that feels tedious or this could be done quicker, I can make a Stream Deck button for it, or a macro for it, or just a function, anything that can help me out, do something faster. To trigger a function or to just get to it quicker. Because if I can do something without using the mouse particularly, I will. Mr. Davies, I really hope that answered the question in terms of how I use the Stream Deck. Maybe down the line when I've got my home profile more fleshed out and added in some old stuff that I had, I can do a follow-up. But I do think that gives you sort of an overview of some of the ways you can use it and, how I'm currently using it. If you do want me to go through another video on the Stream Deck software itself or something like that, like how it works, you know, like in terms of these plugins, how you can configure these macros with the Stream Deck software, because it makes it a lot simpler. It's done in a graphical user interface as opposed to code. Then let me know and I can maybe look into doing something like that. But yeah, that's us for now, and thank you for watching, guys, and thank you again and always for being a Patreon subscriber. It really makes a big difference. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. See you next time.